Welcome to today's deep dive into one of the most defining events of the 20th century, the Great Depression. This global economic crisis, which began in the late 1920s, would reshape economies, societies, and governments around the world. Let's explore how it began, how it impacted the global population, and the long-lasting effects it had on history. The Great Depression started with a single event, the U.S. stock market crash of 1929. On October 29, 1929, known as Black Tuesday, the New York Stock Exchange plummeted, wiping out billions of dollars in value. This event triggered the worst economic crisis in modern history, which soon spread far beyond the United States. Before the crash, the 1920s had been a decade of economic boom in the U.S. known as the Roaring Twenties. It was a time of prosperity for many. The stock market soared, industrial production was high, and consumerism flourished. However, this prosperity masked underlying issues such as speculation in the stock market, a fragile banking system, and agricultural overproduction. The crash itself was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of reckless financial practices. In the years leading up to 1929, investors had been buying stocks on margin, meaning they were borrowing money to purchase stocks. When stock prices began to fall, those who had borrowed money were forced to sell, which only drove prices down further. By the end of October 1929, the market had lost nearly 25% of its value. The immediate impact was devastating. Banks, which had invested heavily in the stock market, began to fail. In 1930 alone, 150 U.S. banks closed their doors. People who had deposited their life savings in these banks found themselves with nothing. Unemployment began to rise as businesses shuttered due to falling demand and bankruptcies. As the U.S. economy contracted, the effects rippled across the globe. Countries that relied on American loans and trade found themselves in economic turmoil. International trade declined sharply as nations raised tariffs to protect their own economies. One of the most significant tariffs was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which increased taxes on imported goods. This move was intended to protect U.S. industries, but it sparked retaliatory tariffs from other countries, leading to a sharp decline in global trade. By 1933, the global unemployment rate had reached staggering levels. In the U.S., 1 in 4 workers was unemployed, the highest rate in the country's history. In Germany, where the economic situation was already dire due to the aftermath of World War I and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, unemployment soared to nearly 30%. In other parts of Europe, unemployment rates were similarly high, and the impact on families and communities was profound. The agricultural sector, already struggling before the Depression, was hit especially hard. Farmers in the U.S. and other countries had overproduced crops during the 1920s, leading to falling prices. When the Depression hit, they could not sell their goods at a profit. The Great Plains in the U.S. experienced the Dust Bowl, a severe drought that further decimated crops and forced many farmers off their land. The Great Depression also led to significant political changes. In the U.S., President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced his New Deal, a series of government programs designed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. The New Deal included initiatives like Social Security, unemployment insurance, and public works projects. Roosevelt's policies reshaped the role of government in the economy and laid the foundation for the modern welfare state. In Germany, the economic hardship contributed to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. As the country struggled with hyperinflation, unemployment, and political instability, many Germans turned to Hitler's promises of restoring national pride and economic stability. Hitler's rise to power in 1933 would ultimately lead to the outbreak of World War II. The global nature of the Great Depression led to widespread economic and social unrest. In some countries, citizens turned to socialism or communism as an alternative to capitalism. In others, extremist political movements gained traction. The economic strain also led to greater government intervention in many countries as governments sought to stabilize their economies and provide relief to their citizens. The effects of the Great Depression were not felt equally across different social classes. While the wealthy often had the resources to weather the storm, working-class families suffered greatly. In the US, many families lost their homes and were forced to live in makeshift communities known as Hoovervilles, named ironically after President Herbert Hoover, who was in office when the Depression began. In addition to the economic hardships, the Great Depression had profound psychological effects. Many people felt a loss of hope for the future, and the widespread poverty and unemployment led to increased rates of mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. The social fabric of societies was torn apart as families struggled to make ends meet. As the years went on, the Great Depression gradually came to an end. World War II played a key role in lifting the global economy out of depression. The war effort spurred industrial production, created millions of jobs, and led to a boom in technological innovation. By the mid-1940s, the Great Depression was largely over, and economies around the world began to recover. The legacy of the Great Depression is still felt today. It changed the way governments approach economic crises, and its lessons have influenced economic policies and strategies in the years since. The New Deal programs in the US, for example, laid the groundwork for the modern welfare state and inspired similar programs in other countries. The Depression also reshaped global politics, leading to the rise of new ideologies and the eventual formation of international organizations like the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund. These institutions were designed to prevent another global economic catastrophe and promote cooperation among nations. In conclusion, the Great Depression was a defining moment in global history. It highlighted the vulnerabilities of the global economic system and the interconnectedness of nations. Though the economic crisis was devastating, it also led to significant social, political, and economic changes that shape the world we live in today. Thank you for watching, and we hope you found this exploration of the Great Depression insightful and educational